I want to welcome Jamie Seeker to the Leaders in Legacy podcast. Jamie is the owner of Seeker Solution, LLC. It's a business consulting firm that delivers strategic planning, financial management, training and development, human resources, marketing strategy, and operations management solutions. She and her team of consultants have used their talents to improve business operations at nonprofits and charities and large franchises, retail, industrial, civic, locally owned private businesses covering multiple industries. Over those years, they have experienced the ups and downs of the economy and apply what they've learned to meet the needs and obstacles that organizations face today. Jamie, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, as we look through that, you're talking about through challenging economies. I think most people would agree that we're in a challenging economy right now. What's your take?
I think perception is reality. And even though some of the numbers might say otherwise, or trends, when you're actually studying the economics of what's happening right now, they might disagree. But at the end of the day, perception is everyone's reality. So they're holding on to their money. They're not spending as much. We're definitely seeing that affecting sales. And so I don't know if it's necessarily economics or just consumer habits right now that we're really seeing. And so I think right now it's a bit of a tough time, but I think anybody that's actually been through a true recession knows that we're doing okay right now.
Yeah. So, and let's kind of pull back and, so we talked about a lot of things that you and your team do. Help me make that a little bit more tangible. So what are some typical businesses that you work with?
Yeah, well, I think, when you were kind of reading that intro, it's kind of hard to be like, all right, well, what is that even? Kind of sounds like everybody. And I think it's because it really is. We haven't had one singular industry that it's like, oh, we work with these people or this. What our common thread is that we do work with small and medium-sized businesses, typically because what the services that we offer most fit into those business sizes. But typically they're privately owned, small business owners that are, between like 5 and 50 employees, maybe like 2 to 10 million in revenue. But the one common denominator is that owner is still like the main operator, and they have their hands in all the details. They're doing all of the things. And that's where we kind of come in with our operational solutions to kind of help offload some of that. So they may not be at a point where they're ready to hire like a C-level, operations person or take over as CEO or anything like that, but they can't possibly do anything more. And more is coming on their plate, and they can see that they're the bottleneck in their company. They can see that they're juggling a lot of things. Typically, common traits that we see is that they're overwhelmed, overworked, worn out, can't take a vacation. If they do take a vacation, they come back to a bigger mess than they, tried to set up. And so it's just this cycle, and that's really where our services thrive. And we really speak well to that size and that phase of company growth.
Neat. And so, one thing that I see, I think there's different stages that owners go through. There's the stage where they try to hang on to everything, and they try to be, cook, bottle washer and everything. Do you run into resistance when you encounter people that they're having trouble letting things go?
Yes, that's also, and that's not just a sometimes trait, that's a 100%. And, we have our own standard operating procedures account for that, and our processes that we go through and the way that we come in with our services absolutely account for that. We're ready. We understand it. I mean, I'm an owner myself, so I also am, dealing with that firsthand. But it's also, it's a natural thing. Like, this is something that when most business owners start their businesses, it's part of their own identity, and it's who they are. And it's not just what they do, or, it starts off as a passion or whatever, but it's really hard to let go and have somebody else do that because it's not you anymore. And so really we just help to try to identify what their strengths are and what really fills them and what gives them life and started their passion in the first place. Because the reality of the situation is they're probably doing things not because they want to, or maybe even good at it. They may not even probably shouldn't be doing it, but the fact is that it's a need, and their company isn't going to survive if they don't have this need to be met. And so most times we're able to kind of identify those things with owners and say, all right, what are the things that are like sucking that life out of you that, maybe you aren't necessarily as good at, maybe you are good at it, you just don't enjoy it. And we really start to say, all right, here are some gaps that we can fill for you, that if we take this off your plate and you work with us and offload some of those things, then how much time and energy is that going to free up from you? And you're opening up your capacity to help to grow your business. So, that's where we come in with like our HR services and things like that, to where it's like, okay, I don't have time to review applications, screen candidates, interview them. I don't even know if I'm good at it. I don't know what questions, I don't know what I'm looking for. And then I hire them, but then I have to train them and I do all these things. And so it's like, okay, is that the best use of your time? Maybe that is your passion. Maybe that's something you're really, really great at, is identifying the right fit for your company and recruiting, good people, but it might not be. And so that's where we have a variety of different operational services like that to say, okay, let's take care of that for you, and we'll kind of loop you into this part of the decision. If you still want to be the end all like decision maker and say, yes, this person can be in this role and this, we're looking at all these other things ahead of time and say, do you really need to do all, from point A to point Z in this whole process? Maybe we can offload, 3/4 of the way, and then you kind of hop in here. How much more effective would you be as an owner, as a leader, push your company forward if you weren't doing all those things? So the HR thing is just one example, but we have other services that kind of, do that. And so I think when you see smaller companies, you have time to do all those things. And it's almost like a rite of passage, right? Like as owners, we need to, it's like, we got to pay our dues, we got to learn and do it ourselves. And that way we know, what can be done, that expectation. But then anybody like over that size tends to have their key leadership team in place. They do have some organizational structure there, and it's not all like only on them, like that one-legged, stool that we're looking at that's like asking just to be tipped over. So that's really where that phase in growth and what we're looking at with those small to medium-sized companies really work well with our services.
So as a consultant, the one of the challenges is always you have some brutal honesty you would like to share, but you can't share. Here's your opportunity. If you're talking to leaders, people that you don't, or business owners listening to this podcast, how is them hanging on to things they shouldn't be bad leadership?
Well, first, I will say that I think my clients would beg to differ. I think we can and we do say things that maybe they haven't heard before, or maybe people haven't held them accountable to doing. Our take on it is, look, if I'm not making you, a little bit uncomfortable and having these difficult conversations with you, then I'm not doing what you brought me on to do. So it is kind of it's not like a stretch for me to come out and say some of these things. So yeah, I think, but obviously to have somebody else maybe hearing it for the first time, I think it's really, I don't know a really good analogy. I normally speak in metaphors and analogies because I think people see it better that way. But I just kind of look at it as, we're not trying to come in and do anything that anybody doesn't already know what to do. But just because you do know something doesn't mean you should do it, right? And it's kind of like, you look at the most elite athletes and the most, professional and high level, high performance. And even they have coaches and they have accountability partners and they have, nutrition and people that are leading and guiding them, not because they don't know what to do. They've been doing it, their whole career or whatever it is, but they need that accountability and they need somebody who is an expert, who is focusing and looking, really focused at a very specific thing like their nutrition or their workout or anything like that. And so that's really kind of what I say is, who are you talking to? Who are you leaning on to be accountable to the things that you need to do? I mean, I know that when I'm in a group, I'm a lot more accountable than when I'm by myself. And using that workout analogy or whatever, I'm much more apt to work harder, in a group class than if I'm like, working by myself. And not because I don't work hard or that I don't know what to do. It's just a natural thing. And so I think that's the one thing, is that everybody needs support. I don't think we're meant to do any of this alone, but the way that our companies are kind of set up is we've started a lot of it by ourselves. And so we're kind of used to this autonomous work environment. But at the same time, when you start to grow, and I think this is kind of to answer your question, is if you have other people that are working with you, they tend to mirror you as the owner. It's like parents that have children. Your children tend to mirror you as the leaders. And so if you are in an authoritative position like that, it is your responsibility to really lead by example. And when you're holding on to things and you're overwhelmed and you're always late to meetings and you're always pushing deadlines and you're always kind of in this chaotic state, guess what? Your company's going to look like that too. And your employees are going to mirror you. And whether it's subconscious or not, or, whatever it is, that is a common trait that we see, is typically, the team and the culture there is really set by the leader that's in that position. So I think that's really, to answer your question, I think that's the most important reason why I would say you've got to get help, and you've got to lean on that, especially if that's the kind of culture you're trying to create.
When you were talking, you brought back a memory of a company that I know that was founded by somebody who his greatest thrill is running into the burning building to save the old lady and the cat. And so he runs his business running from fire to fire to fire. And at one point, he brought somebody else in to help bring structure to that business. And I was talking to her and I said, the problem you have is you're trying to change the behavior that he's set in this company. He's setting that example. And it's exactly what you were talking about. Employees are going to look up to you, and they're going to mimic your behavior because they think, well, that one, they probably respect you, and two, they probably think that's how they get ahead. And so the person that he brought in to bring structure and order eventually quit because he kept on running into burning buildings to save old ladies and cats.
Yeah. And I think that, you make a good point there, is you said that this is how he is, but this is what he said he wanted. He brought somebody in to bring in structure and order. And so we do a lot of work in that, identifying where those discrepancies are and saying, hey, you say you want X, but let me look at your receipts. Your time, your money, your account, like everything is spent doing this. So you say you want this, yet this is what is going on. And so we spend a lot of time kind of evaluating that and reconciling those together and saying, hey, there either you need to make the change in behavior, and this is how you do that, and this is our plan and strategy, and we put out very executable tasks and accountability measures to make sure that happens, and that takes a long time to kind of turn a ship around, right? Or there's a level of acceptance that needs to happen here to say, hey, I can see that you're not willing to change. You are fully admitting that you're not willing to change. So maybe we need to accept that this isn't really what you want. So you need to stop saying that, and you're going to save yourself and your company a whole lot of grief trying to battle between those two things, and just say, hey, let's accept that this is how we are. Let's accept that and celebrate that we're different, and it's not what I thought. It's not what I thought I wanted, what I say I want. And I think that's the biggest thing that we see in clients, that they're not able to do that. And I think that that's where the unhappiness comes from. That's where, that everlasting cycle starts to happen. And we see the most kind of life change really happening either by acceptance or by behavior change. And so I'm a big advocate for, it's not change isn't always the answer. Sometimes acceptance is, and really taking an honest look at, like, who we truly are and what we truly want, not what we think, not what dream we had because this is how we thought it was supposed to be or whatever, but really truly say, look, like, you get to decide. You are the owner. You have all the cards in your deck. Like, what do you want to do? Because this is what your behavior, this is where your money is being spent, this is where your time is being spent, this is what you default to doing every time. So is this really what you want to do? Because these are things that need to change if you really want this. Yeah, so that's where the basis of a lot of our solutions kind of come in and really decide where our best fit is and how we kind of help with that. But all of those kind of philosophies are ingrained into every single one of our solutions. So we get to see all of that, behavior and reaction to it and working through it. And like I said, it's not unique to a particular industry, a particular personality, or anything like that. I mean, arguably, a lot of entrepreneurs have similar personality traits. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting into that. But I think it's a really common thing that we see with business owners. And I can't think of any one of our clients that doesn't fit into that. And like I said, it's more of a, hey, this is just a given than it is a oh, what do you guys come across? It's like, no, this is absolutely something that we're prepared for, and we are intentional about uncovering. So hopefully that resonates with with other. They might be like, oh yeah, I think there's something like that going on around here.
Well, something you said that resonated with me was where you try to reconcile. You say you want this, but I see you doing this. And when you said that, that took me immediately back to a conversation I had almost 20 years ago. And the person said, you want this, but you're acting this way. Do you still want this first thing you said? And I said, yeah. So, okay, well, let's try this different path. And the guy saved me so much grief, money, and just so many things. He was valuable to me. And so I can see where you're valuable to others when you help them reconcile that. Something else you said, I wanted to touch on this, and then we're going to switch over, talk a little bit more about leadership. You were talking about elite athletes, and no kidding, this morning I was writing something to someone. I said, even Michael Jordan had a coach. Michael Jordan, best basketball player of all time, was made better because of Phil Jackson. And I think that's important for business owners to remember, is it's not, bringing in a coach isn't a statement. Unless you think Michael Jordan was insufficient, you should never be afraid of bringing in a coach.
Yeah, I think that's, and we don't necessarily do coaching. I mean, we have actual operational solutions, but I think it's a really good analogy, because I think what we try and do, especially business owners, is we really try to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And because we can. I mean, like, we are high performing, very smart. Like, a lot of us know what we're doing. Some of us wing it, and we're great doing that too. But at the end of the day, like, I think we just forget that we're better off in teams. I really believe that. I think we were created with all different traits and strengths and things like that, because I think that by design, I think we're supposed to be working with other people, and other people's strengths can counter your weaknesses or your gaps or wherever, or just your preferences, and so I think that's what I've found really with my team, and in working with a lot of teams. I think it's really important.
So pivoting a little bit, this is Leaders and Legacies podcast, and one of two questions that we like to ask. One, what are you doing from a leadership position to make an impact beyond yourself? To make sure that you're not that one irreplaceable leader that, and the second question is, like, you remember a white knuckled moment in business where you had to make a leadership decision. It was scary. It was tough. You weren't sure how it was going to work out, but you just charged forward.
Sure. Okay. So the first is, I think I've kind of been on this journey a little bit on my own, and I think it's being replaceable. First of all, it's replacing myself with those that can do things maybe better than me, or just as good, or whatever. Basically, filling needs that I once filled in my company. Kind of going through that journey myself, and this is exactly what we've been talking about. Kind of this whole conversation is, I started off as a consultant by myself with, all the clients on my roster just went to me, and I kind of got to the point where I was at capacity and needed to grow that. So hired on some other consultants to work with me, and started growing their rosters and whatnot. And I got to a point where we were just at a comfortable place, and I had to decide really what my role was going to be, and what's the best way to move my company forward. And I think what my team needed from me was more of me. They needed me to help give them resources, kind of train them into this way of like the vision that I had for the company, how we wanted to deliver our services. But I couldn't exactly do that if my calendar was full of client appointments and really working on these accounts. And so I had to replace me as being a consultant, and really like shift my role as to training and developing and being a resource and available to my team. So I think that's really the first one, is like, I can't keep, I have to, in order to lead, I have to kind of back out of what I started off doing and really train them to take over and do that, for the company. And I can say that I successfully did that within the last couple of months. So I'm in this new journey now where I have no clients on my roster. Not to say that I'm not involved with any accounts or anything. We definitely still have those relationships, but we just kind of grandfathered people in, and as we got new, just assigned them to the new consultants, and kind of built up their rosters and their accounts, and really just kind of stepped away from doing that. And that was a big step. So I think that's, to answer question number one, it's everyone is replaceable, like even yourself. And so how can we, if there's a need that's not being met, or you don't have that kind of resource within your company, how can you train or fill that so that it's not completely and heavily reliant upon you or one person in the company? I think that's the biggest thing is
Yeah, and
taking
something,
that step.
yeah, and something you said that I just really want to highlight. You said that your team needed more of you. And I think that can be a stumbling block for a lot of business owners, because you start off with no support. You go some period of time, maybe it's several years, without support. And you have this kind of baked in assumption, well, I figured it out. It's up to you. I hired you to figure this out. And I think it's a blind spot for a lot of business owners, that your team does need you. So I really appreciate you highlighting that.
Yeah. And then remind me of question 2. I think you were talking about my white knuckle moment, and kind of how I don't know if it was a decision or anything that I made, but it was definitely a white knuckle moment. And it was definitely a big change for me. That was eye-opening. And I think the biggest thing was, I kind of talked about before, this being our identity, and like my company is me. And I think I'm a very relational person, and I care a lot about, the really like who I work with and all that kind of stuff. And so I think one of the things that I had to learn is that just because I was willing to go through a tough relational situation within my company, it was really, how do I say this? I had to really, it wasn't until hindsight looking back to say, I also was then making my employees willing to go through it with me too, if that makes sense. So it was definitely difficult relationally. It was definitely difficult from a working standpoint and all that kind of stuff, but I was willing to do it because that's how I am in my relationship. Like, I'm not I don't shy away from anything that's hard. I have tough conversations. I knew I was willing to come to the table, and kind of go through everything. And at the end of the day, what I realized is that I was signing everyone else up for it too, which wasn't necessarily fair. So as a leader, maybe that wasn't the best decision, but I wasn't quite thinking of it that way. And then number two, because I had a relationship, I was kind of unwilling or just had that blind spot, like you said. Mine was that they were not on the same. We one of our philosophies in hiring is that we hire for shared values, we hire for shared philosophies, and we train up for skill set and the need of the company, right? And so I'm all about that too, and I'm looking for people that share values and whatnot. And my blind spot was because I had a relationship and love for that person and that relationship. It took me a really long time, and it wasn't until they were gone to say, well, they didn't share my values. They didn't share any, like they weren't really willing to open up perspectives and see things other ways. And it was really the rest of my team that had to bring that to my attention and say, look, like this, they didn't have the same values as us. They didn't, and it was like, man. And so whether it's a client or an employee or, anybody that you're working with relationally, sometimes it's hard for you to see that you don't share values, and that's more detrimental to you and your company than sometimes. And if the relationship really is as strong and as important, then you can move on from working together in business and continue on with that relationship. And that's something that I had to learn. And I'm not saying I didn't necessarily make that decision intentionally. It just kind of panned out that way. But it was definitely a white knuckle lesson learned kind of the hard way. So I don't know if that was very vague and not very specific, because I do care so much about, the relationships and things like that, and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully there was enough in there where you can see what I was really trying to say, and that sometimes your relationship clouds your own vision and your own discernment into what's best for your company. And you think because it's been so long or whatever the reasons, they're good or whatever it is, that it's like, yeah, but you're sacrificing, everything that you are, and values are something that you just can't negotiate on. So that's something that I had to learn in my time being an owner.
Well, that's so powerful, and I appreciate your transparency. I think folks listening will take a lot away from that, because it's what you described was a very transparent journey of making mistakes and learning from that, and that's something we all have to do. Jamie, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for coming. How can people find you?
They can go to our website, seekersolution.com. Just kind of learning more about what we do and how we do it. And if it's still not even really clear, because I think people have a hard time with outsourced operations. I think people really understand, like, okay, I hire out for an attorney, like I don't hire them internally, like, you know what I mean? Or I hire an outsourced CPA, but to say, oh, I outsource, my operations, like that's so, I don't understand that, but it's really the same way. So if you want to learn more, you can check out our website. Our phone number's on there. So even just giving us a call, or even just setting up a breakthrough call with us, which is something that we offer as well. And it's what that is just, you can go onto our website, go on to contact us, fill out a form, and they can set up a time to talk to us about what obstacles they're facing in their company, and really just kind of work through that in a quick session with us.
And how much is that breakthrough call?
Well, normally it would be $250, but it's something that we offer to anybody that can find us on the web, or, just wants to learn more. And especially if they're hearing about it through this podcast, they don't need to enter in any code or anything. We decided to offer that as a promotional, hey, just get to know us and we can talk to you about anything that, you're going through. And if you want more information, then great, we can go from there.
Well, I would say to anybody that's listening, it's hard for me to envision the downside of not jumping on that call. So I want to
Sure.
encourage everybody to reach out and do that. Jamie, thank you once again.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Craig.